All right. So, Thomas, how are you?
I'm doing great. I am glad that it's Friday, and
Yes.
yeah, glad that it's Friday. I don't actually work right now because I'm in
Oh,
graduate school, but
oh, wow.
Fridays are usually a long day for me. This was a short day, so I'm feeling nice and mellow.
Right on. Yeah, same. My job has gotten really crazy over the last couple months. And so when it's Friday, I am like, okay, this is the farthest point from Monday. And I'm like loving it. So I feel you
Yeah,
there. So this has been my sort of fun unwind from work Friday, hang out with friends and be goofy and um
nice.
yeah, it's nice. So you're going to graduate school. So what are you studying?
I am getting my PsyD, which is the more clinical version of a PhD in clinical psychology. So it's
Oh,
similar to a
wow.
PhD, but there's one less year of research and more, well, about the same number of what are called clinical hours, which are me doing psychotherapy mostly. Um, and so
Wow.
I'm going to be a psychotherapist, and
You could fix me.
I would love to fix you.
I
We,
would
we're
love for
not
you to
supposed to
fix me
fix anyone, but
too.
of course, I want to fix everyone. That's why I'm doing it.
Oh, wow. Wow. That is fascinating. Wow. Could I pick your brain about a lot of
You
stuff?
also can learn to celebrate. Like a lot of it is learning to be there with them. So, but yeah, so
Hmm.
that's I'm actually entering. I'm finishing my fourth year. It's actually a total of a 4 year program, but I'm taking 5 years because I just didn't. I started so late in life anyway that I figured, what does it matter? I'll
What's
be
another
60.
year, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm going to
Wow.
Reno to work in their counseling program at the beginning of August, and that'll be my last year. Will be spent offsite there.
Wow.
So that's
That
exciting.
is
I'm very
seriously awesome. Seriously. That's like you can really genuinely help people. That's fantastic.
that's why yeah, that's why I got into it. I was because I had been writing for a long time, and I was at the point where I was surviving writing. It was unstable, but it was pretty solid. I mean, I was getting an okay income writing, but I felt like I just ran out of steam, and
Mm,
I wasn't connecting with people, and I really wanted to do something that had me connecting one on one with people, and ideally helping them. Although I'm not under the illusion that I can necessarily always help everybody, but
sure.
you just try, just to give them a shot, just light one candle. And so I really wanted to do that. And I've been teaching sex ed for like 25 years as a volunteer at a
Wow.
nonprofit in San Francisco. And we have a lot because of the nature of that program, which is sex education for people who want to be educators or healthcare professionals. The program sees a lot of people who are in therapy programs. So a lot of them were what we call baby therapists. They're either in school to be a therapist or they're just out of school and doing their hours. And so I knew that I kind of connected with those people and was really interested in what they do. And really to do any kind of sex ed or sex counseling, sex therapy, mostly you lean toward getting a psychology degree or a
Hmm.
master's in family therapy, a marriage and family therapy certificate. So so I knew I wanted to do that, and that's kind of how I got into it.
Wow. Wow, that's really fascinating. So, because when I think of sex education, I think of awkward fifth grade sitting in a class in a
Yes.
classroom. So, were you training people to do that, or were you doing actual sex education?
So we covered all sorts of ages that you would talk to. I would say we weren't very focused on children. Most sex ed
Mm.
is focused on children and adolescents.
Mm.
Most kind of curriculum design within sex ed. Um,
Yeah.
but the nonprofit that I worked for, which is kind of on hold right now, I don't know what its future is going to be, but it was called San Francisco Sex Information, and it was a nonprofit phone line, so people would answer the phones, so
Oh,
anybody could
okay.
call. So kids
Okay.
did call in, but 90%, 90+% of our callers were adults, and
Really?
yeah, and so that was the majority of people were people who wanted to be therapists, people who wanted to be um, therapists, social workers, stuff like that. But the person who was one of the real movers and shakers in that curriculum redesign in the last 10 years, who unfortunately just passed away, rest in
Oh
peace,
no.
was named Evie, and she was the chief, believe she was the supervision of school education for Planned Parenthood in Northern California, which was a program where she would supervise a bunch of educators who would go into schools and
Oh,
do sort of sex positive, body positive, consent positive training with
awesome.
like a very definitely like probably would have a hard time existing anywhere but Northern California, but
Yeah, right.
but was not, but was like all inclusive, was very age appropriate,
That's
was really well
fantastic.
designed, and that was really cool. So that really, to tell you the truth, if you're going to teach adults about sex ed, you're better off looking at how a really effective program for kids and adolescents is, because they have
Yeah.
many of the same questions, because a lot of people just don't get a
Sure.
real good sex ed,
Of
you know.
course not. I
So
mean, I like I said, I mean, I just remember being like awkward and like learning the names of body parts, and that was pretty much the extent of it.
yeah,
And then being horrified by all of it. And I remember my mom tried to talk to me one time about something, and I was just like, nope, walked out of the room.
yeah,
So, I mean, I think most people's education is like trial and error and
yeah,
like locker room talk with, not to bring up locker room talk, but um,
yeah.
but
Well, locker
just
room,
sort of word of
yeah,
mouth, like and most of it's probably completely unrealistic, and you know, I mean, I think that the like a lot of people's education is probably like porn, which is
yeah,
completely completely
right,
unrealistic. You know
right,
what I mean? So, and like nobody
yeah,
knows how their body parts actually work or what they even are, and like,
right.
I
Everyone expects them to function the way they do in porn, and like not to be down on written porn, but like if they're reading porn novels, it's
don't know.
not necessarily any
Right.
better, because
No.
physically there's maybe not as much physical cueing as far as body image and expectations, but
Right.
there certainly is a lot of stuff that's not very likely. It's not necessarily
Right.
socially likely, like even how how
the
seduction works.
right, and
You're
even the
more, maybe you're
mechanics of
more,
it.
yeah, exactly. Maybe you're more likely to learn that from a romance novel than you are from a porn
Right.
movie, but
Even that's
not,
unrealistic though, because
yeah,
life's not like a romance novel. So,
exactly, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Unless it's
So
the ones I write. I'm just kidding.
exactly.
I'm just
Well,
kidding.
good romance. That's the thing, is good romance novels have compelling characters, and good porn has compelling characters too. So ideally, if you are really, if you're really accepting it as fantasy and as fiction,
Hmm.
then there is something to learn from any kind of stuff. I mean, I wrote erotica for years, and I'd love to
Oh,
go back to it, but the intention is not to necessarily create something that's a blueprint for behavior, but sometimes it
right.
is. Sometimes I would do stuff I would write stories that were very specifically about characters I cared about having a
Hmm.
good time, and
Sure.
there's nothing wrong with uh, people kind of imitating that behavior,
Sure.
consensual negotiation and
Yeah, I
stuff like
think
that.
I I think the unrealistic part of it is that, typically in like the classic romance novel is okay, there's a little bit of tension in the beginning, and then everything's perfect by the end of the book. And
Yeah,
then, like the whole unrealistic Prince Charming and like the perfect girl, and that's completely unrealistic, and nobody
yeah,
can live up to those damn standards, you know what I mean? And so
right,
I think a lot of people go through life like, like maybe a guy wants his girl to be like, or whatever, to be like a porn star, and then the girl wants the man to be like, Prince Charming or
yeah.
whatever, and like
The
neither one of those things is remotely accurate, generally speaking. So yeah.
the famous Hollywood rule about the romantic comedy is that formula of a romantic comedy is that in the first act there is no way in hell these two people are going to get together. That is the last person on earth that either of these people wants to be with.
Right.
And then by the end, of course, they're together.
Right.
And that's fine. That creates a compelling story for the same reason.
Yeah.
You know, in Act 1 of a Marvel movie, you don't even know who's attacking, Shield, and you don't even know where are we going to find. Oh my God, this is an insurmountable challenge.
Right.
So that's the romantic comedy equivalent of that. Is this? I'll never be with that person.
Right.
But the problem is that people learn that in real life and internalize that, and so it means they're more. I do think that it lends itself to people being more likely to think, "Oh, I'm with this person that I hate, who's really terrible to me, but this is just the formula. This is how it works. We just got to struggle. You got to fight for love. You have to fight for relationships. Marriage is work. All this stuff.
Yeah.
And on a certain level, some of that may be true sometimes, but a lot of times people think it's more true than it really is, and they end up staying with people they shouldn't.
Right. And I think, obviously you learn by example also. So if you come from a family that had like an unhealthy dynamic, you think that's normal, and then at some point maybe you go, oh my gosh, you mean I could be with somebody that I actually like and get along with? Like, what a weird concept that would be.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have to fight all the time, or be like tense all the time. Like,
yeah,
what an odd revelation, I guess. That should seem to be common sense, but it's however you're trained.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I had no idea.
That was very true. Early in life,
Yeah, I had no idea that this was the stuff that you do. Like, I purposely try not to do a whole lot of digging on people and stuff for these things, because I want conversation to be natural. Like, I want to go in dumb, and I want the person to explain it all, or whatever they want to talk about, and then however the conversation evolves, it evolves.
Yeah.
So I really, I didn't know what we were going to talk about necessarily. Yeah. And I think this is super interesting.
Yeah, if people search my name on Amazon, they'll mostly find horror, a certain amount of horror, and a whole lot of porn, or a whole lot of erotica. Okay, really oriented toward couples. I worked with a writer named Allison Tyler for a lot of years. Violet Blue, who wrote the two really big books in oral sex about 15 years ago. I worked with a lot, and yeah.
Wow, that's cool.
But I left it. But when about 5 years ago, I just ran out of steam. I just lost interest.
Yeah.
I can't get back into writing. So I figured I'd do something else for a while and see what I wanted to come back to.
That's cool, though. Yeah, I mean, it's not like, there's a time limit. If you feel like writing 15 years from now, you can always pick it back up or whatever.
And I'm still a huge fan. I still love horror movies and sci-fi and fantasy, crime especially. I love crime noir. I love noir movies from the 50s. So I'm still a big fan.
That's cool. I admittedly know very little about most things, but I'm not like a porn person. I don't. To me, it's like goofy.
Yeah.
But I also have like a repressed Midwestern thing going on.
Yeah.
So, and again, it's probably like upbringing and what you're exposed to, and just being awkward in general. I'm like completely awkward in general. So,
well, it's the visual, video porn is is goofy, can be very, very goofy. And if you can learn to appreciate its language, it's sort of different. But the place where I think visual porn is really important is in representation, because I do have some friends, being from San Francisco, I have friends who do queer porn, and they do a lot of stuff that's a lot of gender queer porn, a lot of gender radical porn, and trans porn, and it's trans porn made by trans people and trans friendly people
Right. So
is
it's
like
not
really
exploitive.
important. Yeah, exactly. So it's really right. The intention is to sort of make this collective thing, and they end up being very small companies, but there's a real hunger for that kind of stuff, and it's really important just in terms of getting representation out there for what these kind of these kind of bodies look like
Sure.
in real life, and not not in the porn that's made to fetishize them, but the porn that's
Exactly. And
made
it's
to
not like
represent them.
not exploitive of exactly. I think all people have a right to like like should be exposed to different types of people so that you can see we're all basically the same exact
Yeah, exactly.
people.
The yeah, so shout out to the one that I love is the Crash Pad series, which is Shine Louise Houston, multiple award winning, um, within the porn industry, and is like just a very sex positive, very gender inclusive, um, sort of small scale production, but really really well done.
Yeah.
And Courtney Trouble also makes a lot of cool stuff. I think Trouble Films is her organization. They're all in San Francisco, California in general, mostly. But they're not. You won't usually find them in mainstream porn sources. But that's so.
It's like underground music, you have to hunt for it.
Exactly. You've probably never heard of them.
I have not. Well, I have like I don't know anything about it because it's just not my thing.
Yeah.
No offense to anybody else. Do
No.
you?
Yeah.
It's just not my thing. So I like
Yeah.
literally know nothing about any of it.
Yeah.
So this is really interesting to me. I
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
learned most of that stuff. I learned because I worked, not because I write erotica, but because I worked at Good Vibrations, which is I don't know if you know Good Vibrations, but they're the famous women-owned vibrator store in San Francisco, sex toy store.
Oh, that's
And
interesting that you worked there.
yeah, they had grown really quickly. So at the time that I worked, there were about 100 people working for the company, and so I worked there for about 4 years, and met a lot of really great people. And unfortunately, they at the time they were employee owned. Actually, they were entirely
Oh,
owned by their employees, because the founder Joni Blank had been a real activist as far as like labor rights and labor relations, and so
right on.
she made it so that when she sold the company, she wanted to get out. She sold it to the employees, and so so anybody who worked there for more than a year had to buy into the company, and you became an owner.
Oh,
But
cool.
then they ran into financial trouble about 3 4 years after I left. So I think about 2010 or 2008, they 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 ended up having to sell to a large company. So I
Mm.
don't know who owns them now, but they're still operating. So that's good news.
So you're going to school to be a psychotherapist. Do you specialize in sort of like sexual,
Yeah,
whatever you
um,
want to
pro-
call it?
probably I'll end up specializing in couples. So I don't actually know that I'm going to specialize that much in sexuality, other
Mm.
than that if you're a couples therapist, you automatically
You
specialize
kind
to
of
some
have to.
degree. Yeah, to some degree. But at the same time, though, like the work that I've done with couples, remarkably not about sex, less about sex than I thought it would be, and
Yeah.
more about like who does the dishes and who's who
Communication.
communication, who's bitchy when they get home from work,
Right.
who's who flirted with their ex-boyfriend at a party,
Mm.
just like really the stuff
Typical.
that, yeah, stuff that's really challenging, and
Yeah.
it's often really hard to work on, and it's actually many times harder to work on than the sexual stuff. So
Yeah.
that's what I've found.
I could see that. Well, I feel like if all of that stuff gets sort of worked out, the other will also work probably itself out.
It
Maybe.
it will I would say that if everything's going well, working on, and all things being equal, assuming neither partner has like a medical problem that's making it really
Right.
difficult to feel desire or to engage in physical activity, but assuming that's not present, then really like you may need to put work into it, but it's not as much work if you are getting along. It's
Yeah, like you kind of want to get like if you don't really want somebody to touch you if you don't like them.
exactly. Yeah, definitely.
So, you know, maybe like the person and then the other thing will work itself out a little bit better.
Definitely.
Yeah, so have you ever because I imagine with some couples it's probably like they want the therapist to side with them.
Yes, there's definitely that. And that's really like, that's something you learn as a couples therapist. You have to make it really clear that you're not there to side with
Yeah,
anyone.
like to pick sides.
Exactly. And it's really hard not to sometimes, because sometimes
I bet.
it's really difficult to see one partner's point of view. Sometimes they're just being a fool. They're just really
Yeah,
being an
so
idiot.
how do you do that delicately? Like how do you tell the one whoever's the wrong one like they're wrong without
Well,
setting them off?
you focus on feelings. So if the one partner is angry at the other partner for doing something, and this partner says, I what did I do wrong? What I did was totally reasonable. It doesn't really matter that you as the therapist think that what they did wasn't reasonable. The
Hmm.
important thing is that the other partner was hurt by it. And
Right, right,
so,
right.
because that's
That makes
really the
sense.
only way for a relationship to be functional, is when the person who did the hurting is can hear that they did the hurting.
Yeah, that makes
And that's
sense.
what's important. That's what's important. It's not necessarily I did the right thing, I'm in the right, you deserve to be hurt, because you don't want your partner to be hurt, ideally.
Right.
So, I mean, and if you're angry at them, that's different. I mean, you can certainly express anger. So we all do things that make another
Sure.
person angry. But saying I'm really angry at you because you did this
Oh no,
thing
we
is kind of
froze.
incompatible with,
Okay.
it doesn't really work. Like saying, I mean, you can say that, but not, I'm sorry, I actually said it wrong. It's not that saying that is incompatible, saying that and holding on to it. So I'm really
Right,
angry
right,
at
right.
you. I'm going to continue being angry at you because you were a bastard with this
Right.
thing you did. That couple doesn't then have an easy time going to bed and being happy.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean just in general, if somebody's genuinely sorry for something and then the partner keeps throwing it in their face, you can also only apologize so many times.
Yeah, right.
Either the person has to decide to forgive you and let it go or
Yeah, exactly.
say goodbye or whatever. But yeah,
Yeah,
that must be really hard to navigate.
yeah, it's less hard. So I was very surprised. One of the reasons I gravitated toward couples therapy, I didn't think that was going to be my area, even though I'd studied sexuality for so many years. But like once I started working with couples, I actually found it a lot less work than working with
Hmm.
individuals. A lot more
Interesting.
like it has its own challenges, but it's really the couple does so much of the work themselves. And oftentimes, I mean, in my experience, they really want to. They're there because they really want to do the work.
Yeah, I guess you wouldn't go unless you really wanted to fix things.
And that's something I would think about individuals, but a lot of individuals seem to come to individual therapy. And in my experience, it's not that they don't want to do the work, but they're not enthusiastic about it. I think it's really
Hmm.
hard for us to, as a society, to sanction self care. So
For sure.
people have a really hard time getting over the message that they should be sad, that they should be miserable. And I think that's really hard for people. Whereas that's one of the
Yeah.
things being in a couple does, is you form a team, and so you're standing
Yes.
on 2 feet,
Yeah,
and
that's true.
so
That's true. Yeah, I definitely, I mean, I can speak from my own experience. I definitely prefer being in a team environment just because you kind of can put yourself aside and then
yeah,
you're like this united front against whatever drama you're facing, as
yeah,
opposed to when you're on your own, you're just kind of like stuck in your own
yeah. That's
stuff.
that's why I think that I mean, I'm a big fan of being single if it's appropriate for people. I think nobody should feel that they have to be in a relationship.
I
Um,
agree.
and certainly there are some people who are asexual or aromantic,
Sure.
and they may partner in different ways that aren't necessarily something
Right.
that we would recognize, that I
Like
would
traditional.
personally,
Yeah.
yeah, not necessarily traditional, but at the same time, it's like having a partner is predictive for long life, and
Sure.
I think that's one reason is just, I mean, for one thing, it's because you're more likely to call 911 if you are having chest pains in your home and you have a partner to reality check it with. So that's some of it.
Mm.
That's just practical. It's just a
Yeah.
practicality of long life, of especially as you get older. But it's also I think because you've got this sense of getting support where you need it. Um,
Yeah.
but being in a negative relationship, of course, is leads
Right,
to
for
all sorts of
sure.
problems. So
Yeah, I feel like okay, so Mike and I have been together since 93 or something,
mhm.
94. And like I know about as much about a human being as I can know.
Yeah.
And I feel like we've put so much time into like knowing each other that if
Hmm.
something were to happen, I don't want to go there, with the worst case scenario or whatever. I just feel like I wouldn't have the energy to do that again. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Right.
Like I feel like
Yeah.
I would just be like, okay, I'm alone now. I have my son, and
Yeah.
I don't have the energy to like invest that much of my mental and
Yeah.
emotional being into something else again. I don't know. I mean, of course, it's
Yeah.
easy to say that when I haven't been single since like 1991 or something.
Right.
but, I have friends who are single and like it's like they torture themselves over it.
Hmm.
Like there's some timeline that you're supposed to like have met or you
Hmm.
know, and I'm just like, but you're so awesome. Like you have
Yeah.
all like every second of your day is yours. You can do whatever you want to do whenever you want to do it. But like again, it's easy for me to say that because I haven't
Yeah.
been in that position since I was a kid essentially. But
Yeah.
yeah.
It's so hard too as you get older because friends will drop off the map. Maybe they get
Yeah.
married and have kids. I've had friends who had kids, and once they have kids, you can count on,
It's hard.
unless you're going to do a lot of babysitting, which is definitely one option. But you can
Or
count
be
on two.
uncle.
Exactly. Yeah, you can count on 2, 3, 4, 5 years where they're not as available. And you
It's
may
hard.
reconnect, but it's difficult. So as somebody who's single, you do kind of progress toward a state of being more alone, or you spend periods of time where you're more alone. You really have to work to
Yeah.
maintain friendships. Um,
Yeah.
but adult friendships are so important for all the reasons that relationships are a predictor of
Totally.
long-term mental health. Being in adult friendships can be just as much.
For
So
sure. Like, everybody, I mean, I hope everybody has at least one person where they can kind of go to like unload things on and like I have a couple of friends where if I'm feeling a certain way about something or stressed out about something or whatever, I like to say, okay, am I being realistic with I need you to tell me if I'm being ridiculous or not with what
yeah,
I'm stressed out about.
right.
So I feel like even if you don't have like a romantic relationship, as long as you have like that in somebody,
Yeah,
you're good, I think.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And again, some people just don't want a romantic relationship. For some
Sure.
people, it's just not something they experience, or they don't experience it
Totally.
in the same way. Because people
Right.
who are aromantic or asexual may have long-term partners. They just have,
Right.
they maybe have a different language for what their
Yeah.
love is like.
It's and there's nothing wrong. I mean, there's completely nothing wrong. Like I can see the appeal of that.
Yeah, definitely,
I can totally see
definitely.
the appeal of that. I think that's cool. I think
Yeah,
people should just that's the thing that is irritating because like a lot of especially like well, I'm sure this happens to men too, but a lot of like women as they start to get older, there's all this like pressure of, are you going to have a kid? Are you going to be
yeah,
married? Or, all this stuff.
yeah,
And I, for the longest time, I didn't want to have kids. It wasn't my thing.
yeah,
Kids freak me out, whatever. And then one day it just didn't scare me anymore. So I'm like, okay, it's fine. But I have friends that have zero desire to have children, and it's like, that's fine. Like,
Yeah.
you shouldn't have anybody trying to browbeat you into bringing a human being into the world. Like, that's really
Yeah.
weird, you know?
Yeah. It
And then
needs to be
whole like getting
normalized.
married. Yeah, for sure. Like, not everybody has to have children. Like, I don't know. But on the flip side of that is I do have a lot of friends also who were like negative towards people who do want to have a
Yeah.
traditional like family situation. So it's like, I mean, as it always says, just don't be a dick to other people. Let people live
Yeah.
their lives.
Right.
If you don't want to have kids, don't have them, but don't be a jerk to the people that do, and vice versa. So I mean,
Yeah.
the universal just don't be a dick, I think, is
It's a good, rule of thumb. Yeah.
pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I really, I can't understand that whole judgy thing that people do with everybody else. Like, really the only people I get judgmental towards are people who are assholes, like
Right.
actively hateful to other human beings. Like, that I'll judge. But as far as like how you want to live your life or whatever, as long as you're not hurting anybody,
Yeah.
how's it anyone's business,
Yeah. That's what I always wonder about a lot of people who get really worked up about things like issues around trans people using such and
Right.
such bathrooms. I mean, by which I mean trans people should be able to use whatever bathroom is appropriate
Sure.
for them,
Sure.
and yet people get these phantom ideas about
Right.
like J.K. Rowling's obsession with the idea that predators are going to be going into women's bathrooms or stuff like that. And I just think, like,
So
why are
ridiculous.
you making the world more complicated than it really is? If you just met some people who have that experience and talk
Right.
to them like human beings, you would understand that this is very different than what you think it is. And I
Absolutely.
just
And
don't understand it.
yeah, and there's like this fear of the unknown, I guess.
I
But
get.
and okay, I'm the mother of a little
Yeah.
boy. He's 9, and I'm not afraid of a trans person at all. I am nervous about
No.
him around men
Yeah.
because I mean, and it's, again, it's not just men. Women do
Yeah.
horrible things also. I'm well aware of
Right.
this. But typically you're not going to have to worry about your kid being molested by a trans person. Like,
The
that
right to
doesn't
sister.
happen.
Yeah. Not to be. I mean, I hate to be sexist towards cis men, but
Sure.
demographically, you're much more likely to be in trouble. And I think that's something that women learn very early that cis
Since
men
day one.
don't learn. I mean, you learn it as a child,
Yeah,
and
a
I don't
hundred
think that
percent.
cis men learn that, and I don't think they respect it with women. And so when women voice that concern, cis men often respond with, well, but not all men, not but
Oh,
not
and of
me, I'm
course.
not like that. And that's fine, of course,
Sure.
but at the same time, if you're walking down the street alone and you're feeling threatened, you don't give a damn if it's all men. You give a damn whether you feel threatened.
That's
And
right.
that's as long as people are aware, of what's going on in their radar. Sometimes that's for good reasons. And I know too many women who have had, incidents where they were preyed upon to
Sure.
think that this isn't something that is a survival mechanism. And,
Yeah.
taking it personally is just ridiculous.
Yeah. And I mean, even like, I mean, little girls are taught, like, don't sit on that uncle's lap. I mean,
Right.
these are just things that you're
Yeah.
taught. Like, don't.
Rather than challenging the uncle's behavior and saying, wow, that's really creepy what you did. Don't do that.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, even, we all know, like, don't put yourself in certain position. Like, it's always blamed on the girl. It always has been, even as a little kid. It's like, I can remember being picked on by a certain boy and being told, "Oh, he just likes you." What a fucked up
Yeah,
thing to
right,
teach a kid. Okay,
right.
so now as a little child, you're training me that if a guy's mean to me, that means he likes me. Like, what kind of
Yeah,
a weird thing is that to teach people? So
yeah.
weird.
It's awful.
And then, back to the whole like danger thing. Um, when a few years ago, Dirk was 4, I believe 4 or 5. we drove from Arizona to Ohio and then to Michigan and back home. We drove up there to visit our families. And we stopped at this truck stop, and Mike took Dirk in to use the bathroom. And there was this older, like truck drivery looking guy just hanging out in the bathroom, like white, like wetting himself down in the sink, kind of like cleaning up or whatever. And Mike looks like an older guy. At the time, he had like a big white beard, and he looked more, I guess, grandpa-y or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. And so he took Dirk in to go to the bathroom. And when he came out, that guy started talking to Dirk.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like this very creepy, almost like like definitely predatory. Like
Mm-hmm.
almost like he thought Mike maybe was also like that or something. Like didn't and
Oh,
Mike,
wow.
well, first of all, let me just say that guy was this close to getting his teeth kicked down his throat.
Yeah, I
Because
bet. Yeah.
he kept trying to talk to Dirk, and Mike's like, back the fuck off. Like it was really scary. And it's like, who
Yeah.
knows how many, like, I mean, you hear stories about people sort of like in truck
Yeah.
stops preying on people, and like, who knows, what goes on in these things or whatever. But it's
Yeah.
like, am I worried about a trans dude doing that?
No.
No. Or like a trans,
No.
I mean, that's just, but I do, typically
Yeah.
you hear the stories about priests, and again, I'm not
Right.
generalizing, but
No, but it's the people society gives power to who are most likely to abuse it.
right, exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's just scary. And then again, like you said, a lot of times it's like kind of blown off, like, oh, you're being dramatic, or it's not all of us. Like, well, nobody said it was,
Right.
but if you do the statistics and look at the math,
Right.
you know.
Right. Right. And it's just a resistance on the part of cis men to like take responsibility for their action, responsibility for cis men's actions. Because I'm not going to do something like that. But when women say, "Oh, men are trash," I know that they're shorthanding. A lot of men are
Right,
trash. Some men are trash. It's not
right.
all men. Doesn't mean me. I don't take it personally.
Exactly,
It's about
exactly.
frustration. It's about needing to be
About a
able to
type of,
shorthand.
yeah, it's about
Yeah,
a type of person.
and
Yeah,
needing to be able to express that feeling and not
right.
be held to it. Well, is that literally true? All men, constantly, every single man in the world,
Right,
like
right,
not being held to that because that's not what the expression's about. The
right.
expression is about frustration, about anger.
Yeah, and and even there's a lot of weird pressures put on little boys too. I mean, things that you hear, don't cry like a girl, like stop acting like a little girl, and like stop throwing
Yeah,
like a girl, and boys are supposed to be tough and they're not supposed to show their emotions. And I remember like when Dirk was 2, he wanted a doll. They had dolls at daycare, they played with dolls, and we got him a doll or whatever. And I can remember that when I was little, my cousin, who's a boy, had a doll, and how it was like the talk of the family. Oh, he plays with dolls. Like, oh, so you don't want your kid to learn how to nurture a child like you would your daughter? Like, what's and so there's all this weird. And so I'm not like, I'm definitely, I love men, I love women, I love all things in between, and other. It's just sad, I think, the conditioning that's put on women and the conditioning that's put on men, and people aren't held accountable for bad behavior. And it's just created this mess of awfulness, I guess,
yeah. It's weird how boys liking dolls is taboo, but liking action figures is fine. I was obsessed with action figures. I
Yeah.
loved my Star Wars action figures when I was a kid. I wish I'd saved them. I'm sure they'd be worth a lot of
Yes.
money now. But oh man, I
Yeah.
used to love those. Oh my god, there's Han Solo and Luke Skywalker with the extending lightsaber.
Yeah.
So phallic, so Freudian.
Well, and it's so stupid too, because even like eh, oh, boys don't wear purple or boys don't wear
Yeah,
pink, and I'm like, how is a color a gender? Like Dirk, for his school pictures, I took him to the store. I'm like, pick out whatever you want, and he picked out this pink hoodie, and I'm like,
yeah,
he looked great, like he
yeah,
looked so good, and it brought out his blue in his eyes and all this stuff. And like my mom commented, she was like, I just love how boys now, and men wear more colors than just brown and gray and
Yeah.
whatever. And I'm thinking, how ridiculous that like the time that she grew up in, if a guy wore like a pink shirt, holy crap, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
at least we've come a little bit far
It's
from
funny
that,
though.
but
It's funny that you say that because it must just be, I don't know how old you are, but I'm 53, and so
I'm close.
I entered high school in um, 1983, fall of
Mhm.
1983, and so I was like in high school at the height of the Don Johnson was on Miami Vice. All the new wave bands were wearing like, oh God, I
Makeup.
used to love these. I had this cap sleeve, thick stripe with a what do you call it, a banker's collar, little that fit me so tight, and I would wear it with a skinny tie with piano keys. Oh my God! So like, and it was pink, and then the tie would be like red. And
Yeah.
it was so funny. The new wave, I guess, saved me from gender police, at least as color goes. I never really got into wearing makeup, but that was like a British humor. But I did get my ear pierced, and I wore a
But
lot of pink in those
which
years.
year did you get it in? Remember
I
that was
got
a
this
whole
one,
thing.
yes, that
Remember
was a whole
that?
thing because if you got it in this one, you were supposedly gay, unless you
Yeah.
were in Canada, and then that meant you were an English nobleman. Like you could decide you were an
Wha-
English nobleman and get
Oh
your
my
ear pierced.
god.
So
So
anyway,
weird.
yes, and yeah, but I wore a lot of pink in those years. Boy,
Yes,
yeah,
I remember like pastel peach and like
yeah,
teal.
yeah, and the
And so
boat,
at least we've graduated from that.
yeah, exactly, right. So it's yeah, but it was interesting because it was so. I mean, I look back on the new wave era, and well, it wasn't just new wave; it was metal too. They were
Yeah.
wearing like just caked on makeup, and not like Kiss makeup, but
Like
like
a girl.
Pearl makeup,
Yeah.
like Poison, D. Snyder. I mean, D. Snyder looked like I mean, he just it was crazy. And then in new wave, you look at a flock of seagulls,
Duran Duran.
Duran Duran. I mean, they were all.
All the
It's like,
new romantics. I think we got
yeah,
stuck. Yeah.
you seen Billy? Yeah, right. All of them, the Cars, all of them were so with
Mhm.
the pompadours and like Bruce Springsteen and Billy Joel were the only ones wearing, the only white guys wearing no makeup.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, it's funny too because I grew up in rural Ohio, so it was very traditional. And I remember when, like, I never judged people though. Like, that's just not in my nature. I mean, I was more of a dick back then than I am now, but you know, you grow and you learn.
Yeah,
But I remember like the first thing that I really truly fell in love with was Robert Smith. And
yeah,
it never phased me that he wore lipstick. Like it didn't even, it
yeah,
wasn't like male, female, like it never phased me or anything. And I think how weird that must be to like normal people or whatever.
yeah.
But I just never saw any of that as being strange or like Bowie or like none of that seemed
Right,
strange to me. But I imagine
right.
like to normal people that must have been like, holy cow.
Well,
Yeah.
thinking back on it, I'm just amazed how much of it there was because my high school
Yeah.
was so homophobic, and
Yes.
they, they're I remember there was a woman who was a lesbian who was in my senior class, and I saw her at a gay bar my senior year. We were both 17, and there was this gay bar here, long since passed. I won't name any names, but people who live in Sacramento will remember it. And I went there with friends, and she called me aside and said, like, hey, are you queer? And I was like, no, I'm just open minded. And she was like, well, I am, but don't tell anyone because I just got a
Yeah.
bunch of shit for it. And I'm joining the army after graduation. And she was
Oh,
terrified. And apparently she had
yeah.
gotten a bunch of shit for being gay at school. And she was
How
terrified that it was going
awful.
to jeopardize her entering the military because back then you couldn't do
Sure.
that. So, and until recently.
Sure.
couldn't do it.
That's
So,
awful.
so it's weird to me thinking about how, we lived in this world where that was the predominant fashion statement, and yet, there was all this homophobia.
Yeah. Yeah, because a lot of the guys, like, I'm sure it was the same in your school. Like, if any of the men who were like different or like not on the football team or whatever, it's like they would always call people fags or whatever.
Yeah,
That was the worst insult you could throw at a guy.
yeah,
So like any of the kids that I went to school with who were like skaters or into like alternative music or whatever, that's what they got called constantly. But
yeah,
yet these guys who were calling them that all liked Motley Crue and like
yeah. I
Skid
see.
Row and like Alice Cooper, and I'm like, these dudes are prettier than most of the girls at this
Right.
school. Like, what? I don't get it.
Yeah, that's right. Alice Cooper. I forgot about Alice Cooper being the predecessor of a lot of them, even
Sure,
more than Bowie, because his look was so much more extreme,
right,
in terms of fashion.
sure,
Uh, I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, what? Yeah, and they all loved those people. Even
yeah.
the because I had a bunch of Hesher friends who hated Motley Crue because they were fags, and but loved
Meanwhile, those dudes got more pussy than any.
yeah, I know. I know. Well, but they loved Dee Snider. I don't know why, and they loved Alice Cooper.
I
They
don't get
loved
it.
Aerosmith. They loved the classic rock
Molly
like
Crew were just
Aerosmith.
too pretty, man. It made
I
them
guess
feel
that's it.
funny in their pants because
Yeah,
Nikki Sixx was
exactly.
so beautiful that it made them feel funny feelings. That's what
I guess
that's
so.
what that's what happened there.
Exactly. Yeah.
I
The first,
guarantee you that's the problem.
just remembering the first Christian Death album I got. I looked at the back and realized I had absolutely no idea what gender any of these people were. That was really funny. That was about
Yeah, that's interesting.
1985. Yeah, because it was Christian. I think it was only Theater of Pain and the pictures, because they all had names that were gender ambiguous too, like Roz Williams,
Right?
and they were all wearing awful lot of makeup. So that was I guess
Yeah.
I guess I could say that New Wave Goth and Rocky Horror Picture Show saved me from being homophobic or transphobic.
Yeah. I just never cared.
Yeah,
Like who cares? I don't know. Cause like we used to go to the gay bars over in Akron because they played the best music. And it
totally.
was fun. And
Yeah,
I mean, some of my friends were gay, of course, but I wasn't or whatever. And we just went and had fun because it was the best place to go to have fun.
yeah, right. That's
Yeah.
why. Yeah, that's. I mean, gay bars played great music, and
Yes.
it was the only place that I could get in as an underage
Mm,
kid. I mean, I'm amazed that they let me in. They don't let. I don't think that happens now, but back then,
probably not.
for all the Mothers Against Drunk Driving and stuff, it they let it slide, I guess.
Yeah.
So it
I
still amazes
think
me.
go ahead.
I was just going to say it still amazes me that I was able to do that, but it was a great experience. And of course, I was too terrified to actually drink, so I didn't
Yeah.
go up to the bar and order a drink. So I went into this bar, 17 years old, and just hung out there.
Sure. Yeah. I think how in some ways probably that's such a safe haven for people who didn't have a safe haven anywhere else. So in some ways I'm like it kind of was rude of like us straight people or whatever to come in there and like sort of take over their environment or something, but I mean obviously we weren't taking it over because we were supportive and some of my friends were also gay or whatever, but I think like what you said about how you saw the girl from school and how that probably terrified her.
Yeah,
Like what if you were going to go to school and like rat her out or whatever.
right.
And I'm sure like the beauty of those places is that people can be free to be themselves without worrying about stuff like that.
Yeah,
And then I think about how, especially for teenagers and even now, what a terrifying thing to have to hide something so big to you. That's
yeah,
just awful.
it really is. Yeah, And
That's sad.
yeah, it really is. And I know that like a lot of times whenever somebody who's a teenager who's queer or trans commits suicide or something, everybody
Senseless.
everybody feels, those of us who are sort of, either a little bit older, a little more liberal, or more in control of our lives, think, oh, it's such a shame if they just waited a few years, if they just understood that there's a whole community like them,
Yeah.
that they have these resources they can access. But when you're locked in that cycle of self blame, and you're
Yeah.
afraid that you're going to be spend the rest of your life alone and despised, and I mean, I don't
Ugh.
mean to make it sound like I'm not overstating it for humor, but it's like the thinking is not necessarily rational, but it
Right.
seems very rational at the time,
Right.
and it can be so real that it just leads people to take radical
It
action.
just makes me so sad. Like that's so tragic to me to think of like cuz I mean, obviously in for different reasons, but as a teenager just like I think most of us are pretty miserable as teenagers anyway. And
Yeah,
then just the thought of knowing like you said like just wait a couple years, it gets better, I
yeah,
promise you. And to
yeah,
think that somebody so young just gave up, like nah, I don't want to say they gave up, but just they
yeah.
were so close to potential
Right,
freedom and happiness, and then you know what I mean, like
right.
that's so freaking sad.
Well, and the unfortunate truth is that like it's not necessarily that easy for everyone, because a lot of people
Sure.
do grow up and, like, if they don't have, if they're not able to stick with school, find a job that they like,
Right. A support
somewhere a little more
system.
accepting, a support system, if they have a hard time making friends, they may find themselves just as miserable in 10
Oh,
years.
that makes me so
And
sad.
it's really, that's the thing, is that like, and that's why it's really important to have this, like, the media representation that we're seeing, like Pose, that won so many awards. I don't know if you know the show Pose.
I
uh,
don't. Oh, I've heard
Great
of it.
show. It's a great show on Netflix. It's about the ballroom scene in Manhattan in the 80s. Um,
Oh, interesting.
the Learning. It's about drag queens in the 80s. Drag queens and transgender performers both. Back then, there was not a firm line, I think, between. And anyway, so Pose is the show, and it's got all the people who are trans characters are portrayed by trans performers, and it's incredibly, like, the number of famous trans people in media went, like, tripled overnight because because of this
Yeah.
show, because there were so many people who had been kind of, cast as trans performers. And also, this is also, they're primarily Black and Latina, so it's, even more of a solid representation for people who weren't being seen. So like that's so important, because it shows people that, even these characters are not well off, they're not wealthy, but they are living their lives, and they have a support system, and that stuff's just really important. Even if kids
Yeah.
can't watch that, even if, like, a 15-year-old at home in a transphobic or homophobic family is not necessarily going to be able to watch that show, but just knowing it
It
exists, knowing,
exists, right?
reading in People magazine that somebody won an award for being in a show like that,
Right.
I mean, that's the way it was. If you were taboo, it was taboo to read the story of O. When I was young, and when I finally got to read it, I was like, oh, okay. It was like a little disappointing, but
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. I feel like you said, it's like at least if they know it exists out there, at least they can maybe strive that
yeah,
once I'm out of school, I can
yeah,
get there. You know, I can
right,
like that's a goal to get out of here and go to there, you know, kind of thing. I mean, it
yeah,
was sort of similar. I mean, I think a lot of people go through that, like whatever you're being bullied for or whatever
yeah,
kind of depressing situation you are in, if you
yeah,
can sort of find that path, like if I get through this here, I can get to there.
Yeah.
you know, and it's just so sad to me to think there's, I mean, anybody, but especially like young kids who are just brand new to the world and just
Yeah.
starting out, to think that they've already reached the conclusion that this is it and this is as
Yeah.
good as it's going to get and I can't deal with it. That's so heartbreaking. Like, I can't, as a mother, the thought of that just
Yeah.
devastates me, you
Yeah.
know?
It's really upsetting. It's really
Yeah.
upsetting. Um,
But hey, that's why people like you exist.
exactly. That's so I was lucky enough to spend about a year and a half interning at, or practicum is what we call it, but doing therapy at the Gender Health Center in Sacramento, which is a really great organization that was set up by and for trans people um, to, to offer free therapy to anybody. You don't have to be trans to get therapy there, but it's oriented toward the LGBT plus community, and it was a great experience. So I worked with a lot of trans clients, and it was really wonderful, great learning experience for me, and I felt like I was really offering a lot of great resources. So
Well, and I just think that if somebody, regardless of their age or whatever, is like struggling with anything really, just
yeah,
knowing like there's someone like you who, like, I can feel that you just don't judge people. Like, you come across as someone who just, hey man, live your life, you know? And I think that having somebody like that could be the difference between somebody killing themselves and someone trucking on another day. You know what I mean? I think
sure hope
that
so.
it's so important, you know, and I mean, I hope that if there's anybody around me, young or old or whatever, who, I mean, I would hope that I could do that to
Yeah,
somebody to help them truck on another day. But
yeah.
I
I mean,
just,
being
it's
involved
so
in music,
important.
I think, is a great path for that, because it is, it's a universal language. It's something,
Yeah.
if you put yourself out there as somebody who's accepting, and has this music group, find music, and they're more likely to sort of like listen to your opinions, and take some comfort with that, so they have the sense that there are people with accepting views.
Yeah, and I feel like music itself can sort of be a therapy, you know? I mean, that's not a deep insight. Everybody knows that. You know, if you're feeling a certain way and you listen to a certain type of music, it obviously has an effect on you.
Yeah,
So I think, I mean, I've had people tell, you know, we've gotten emails and stuff from people saying, you know, the music helped them through a really dark time in their life, and
yeah,
this, and I can't even say how that makes me feel, because it's such a bizarre thing, first of all, that something that
yeah,
you do sort of in the privacy of your own home about whatever your own thing is
yeah,
could have such an impact on somebody else. Like, that's bizarre enough, you know?
yeah, yeah,
But to know that somebody was like, because, you know, we've all been there in those depths of despair and found our own sort of thing, and to know that we helped in any way through that is like hugely, I don't know the word, flattering. I don't know, not, it's not flattering,
sobering.
it's touching. Yeah, it just, there's no word for it really. It just, to know that somebody was in that moment and so down, and they were able to find at least a little bit of comfort in something that we created,
Yeah,
is, it makes me feel good that, okay, that was worth putting, you know, going through all of this with
yeah,
music or whatever, that you know, you did something right for somebody, you know,
yeah, right.
I
Well,
guess.
yeah, and that's I mean, that's the whole purpose. Music has served. It's connecting. You know,
Yeah,
connecting
for
people,
sure.
connecting communities. I mean, whole communities. If you look at like a community, drum circle in Africa, it's like the whole community comes together to do, and they're all dancing and they're all drumming.
Yeah.
There'll be like 30 drummers, and it really is about sort of creating connection. And now
Yeah.
that we have, you know, um, the technology to make individualized music at the level where one person can be, I think most of the first two Nine Inch Nails albums were recorded, just mostly by Trent, if I'm not mistaken. I might be mixing them up with someone else. Anyway, a lot of albums were recorded by just one person.
Sure. Mike is a prime example of that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff, the connection can become so intimate and so personal. That's really amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that about music too, is that, something that somebody writes means something very different to them than what it means to the person who's listening to it.
Yeah.
And it could be, you could write something completely either really personal or just sort of silly even.
Yeah.
And depending on the mood of the person who hears it, they're going to interpret it through whatever lens they have. Yeah. And it has a completely different meaning to it. I think that's neat.
Yeah, it's really, I love that about lyrics. I think of David Byrne lyrics because I remember when I was like 17, like discovering Talking Heads and listening to the lyrics on Stop Making Sense, and then later I went back and listened to their studio albums, and some of those lyrics are so perplexing, they're so weird and so hard to understand. And I would just read these meanings into them, and then now, 30 years later, I go back and I'm like, oh, he was just messing with us. And other times,
funny.
I mean, there's songs like Heaven, which I think are really straightforward, really obvious, just so obvious. But like Psycho Killer, qu'est-ce que c'est? I still don't even know what it's about. It's just a weird series of words that all create this portrait that's not really, I don't know what it's about.
And sometimes the person that writes it don't really know what it's about either.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's true of a lot of songs.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's a lot of stuff I've written that I'm like, I don't fully understand what the meaning of this is.
Yeah. But songwriters famously say, "Oh, I don't know what it's about," like Brian May famously keeps getting asked what some of the weirder lines in Bohemian Rhapsody is about, and he says, "I have no idea." You'd have to ask
Sometimes
Freddie.
words just fit together too. I mean, like literally. I remember there was a line in there's a line in Hiraeth that Mike goes, "What is that about?" And I'm like, that's just the words that came out. I don't know. Right. I don't know. And I'm sure there's a meaning to it someplace, and maybe at some point it'll make more sense to me.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't know. Like in writing poetry, that happens a lot too, where you're just kind of, I don't know, it's almost like being a medium in a way. Like sometimes you do write very specifically, but sometimes you just kind of open up and whatever comes out, comes out. Like sometimes the music pulls certain words out and you go into something with certain intentions, but that's not what happens. Right. When you end up at the end of the day. So it is weird. It's very weird.
Yeah. I think of there's a Lou Reed lyric in Andy's chest off of the album Transformer, curtains laced with diamonds dear for you. And Lester Bangs, who's a famous 70s, 80s rock critic, early 80s rock critic, just made fun of him mercilessly for that line because it just made no sense. But it's a great line. Curtains laced with diamonds dear for you. I don't know, works for me.
Yeah, this is the problem I have with critics, because I just and I won't do it to other people. Like if somebody wants me to give an opinion on a specific opinion on something, I just won't do it because it's so subjective.
Yeah.
There's no way of, how can you judge somebody else's perspective? You really can't. So when somebody creates something, you're only judging it from your lens, which is accurate or inaccurate, but it's sort of irrelevant. Yeah. So if my opinion is only relevant to me, and sometimes that's questionable, whether it's relevant to me or not. But I just think it's funny that people get so like judgy towards whether it's movies, music,
Yeah.
whatever, and it's like you can't really judge the creator's perspective on it. So why do you even try, really? I don't know.
I do like, I will say that the kind of criticism that I really like is the kind that goes, for music at least, is the kind that goes back 20 years later and pieces the historical events together. Like I just watched the series on hip hop. You can get it on Netflix. It's Hip Hop Generation, I think, and
Mm.
it's so good. It's 4 seasons. The guy who hosts it as a rapper. He's not a famous rapper, but he's a performer as well as a host. And he goes around and he talks to all the historical figures who were behind the creation of hip hop from the early '70s into the people who did the first basement parties. Pardon me. There's my post-COVID syndrome. And boy, it's extensive and it's got some great stuff. And
Yeah, that sounds good.
where it's like, um, yeah, it's so interesting to see the historical pieces fit together. And as somebody who didn't really follow that kind of music while it was happening, it's fascinating for me to recognize things happening in the news and think, oh, that's what that was.
Yeah.
And that kind of historical, I love rock and roll history, and
Yeah.
especially when you can really look at it in such a heavily stylized form like hip hop to be able to track different influences from decade to decade and year to year. In some cases, from month to month, because they even go back and talk about the month, particular month that a particular release dropped.
Mm.
Significant because certainly when you talk about Tupac and Biggie and all that, those kind of events, the month by month chronology is pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
And that stuff I love. I love that kind of criticism, that historical content.
Yeah, I don't know. To me, that's more just documenting
Yeah.
what happened, and not so much like critiquing style as far as like, you know what I mean, like talent and all that stuff. But I don't
Yeah.
know. I think that people have this weird need to dissect everything.
Yeah.
And it's usually from a negative perspective. Like they go into it looking for what they don't like as opposed to what they do. Are you having static on your side? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I don't have any static.
Okay, because there's like a weird electronic sound going on. I can still hear you, but I was just like, I wonder if that's on my side or it's on your side.
How's that? Is that any better?
I don't think I hear it now. No, it's still there. It's like a weird Mothman prophecy, electronic,
That's kind of cool.
electronic weirdness in the background, and it just started.
Oh, interesting.
Ugh, I'm kind of creeped out now.
That is pretty weird.
I'm like, is it saying things?
Yeah, I'm definitely not hearing anything.
That's really weird.
Yeah, I wonder if
Yikes.
yeah, you could try taking out my headset and seeing if it's on the phone itself.
I don't know. It's almost like picking up weird static, and I'm like, what would it be picking up static from though? Isn't that strange?
That is. How does it sound now?
Yeah, let me see. Keep talking.
Okay. Are you still?
No, it's not there now. So your headphones maybe were picking up some
Weird.
otherworldly voices. I don't know.
But I couldn't hear him on my end. That's really strange.
That's really weird.
It must have been the microphone. I wonder if somebody next door is playing with a Ouija board. No.
Oh my god. Don't say that. No, but it was really weird because like we watch a lot of like Ghost Adventures and stuff. And I'm like, if I start hearing freaking voices coming through there.
Yes.
Scary.
Have you ever seen the movie I can't remember the name. Never mind. I was about to recommend a horror movie that's really terrifying that was made during It's a bunch of teenagers who are talking on the phone, and they're having a group chat. Gradually, each of them gets murdered.
Oh,
It's really disturbing. But now I can't remember the name of the title, so I'll see if I can find that.
I have this weird relationship with horror because I like scary stuff, but like I can't do slasher type stuff.
Yeah.
And I can't do like those paranormal activity movies.
Oh,
We went
those
to
are
see
scary.
I can't do it. And I can't watch The Exorcist. I watched it once.
Yeah.
I can't watch, like I just pictured her face and I get freaked out.
The Exorcist is straight up terrifying. So you're not alone in not being able to watch that.
It's so scarily relatable to me that I can't watch it. And like, but I love like vampires and like, I don't even consider that horror. Like, I don't consider like vampire movies horror or like,
Yeah.
I don't know. But I like, I guess maybe classic like ghosts and stuff like that. But I don't like any like violent slasher type stuff or.
Yeah.
I'm too scared of real, because those are real people. Like,
yes.
And that can really, like, that stuff can really happen. So
like Friday the 13th.
I don't like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like that stuff.
I am I really love the classic, William B. Castle 60s ghost movies. The Haunting is great. I mean, all those are so good, so beloved.
Yeah.
The movie I was thinking of is called Unfriended. And
I saw that. I didn't see the movie, but I've seen it advertised. Yeah. I think it might be on Netflix.
It's probably on Netflix, yeah. I think it might even be on YouTube. I'm not sure, but it's really, I must have watched it on Netflix. If not Netflix, it's definitely on Hulu. It's
or
on
Prime
one of the two.
Or something.
Yeah, it's really cheesy, but it scared the hell out of me. I think I watched it in the middle of the night when I was alone, and it was just scary.
Yeah, sometimes stuff just hits you weird, like The Ring. That movie scared me so bad, and like, but it wasn't the movie itself. It was, the black and white images on the video in the movie.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry, which movie?
The Ring.
Oh yeah, right. Those are scary. Yes.
So after we watched that, like, it's a really good movie, but after we watched it, every single time I would shut my eyes, I could see the image of that tree.
Oh yeah.
And I couldn't stop it from happening. Like, every time I would try to fall asleep, I would shut my eyes, I could see the image of that tree. And just like those weird random black and white images that were like on the VHS tape in the movie kept replaying themselves. And then of course, I've got really long hair. So this is so stupid, but I had really super long black hair at the time. And I remember getting up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, and we have this huge mirror like over our double vanity or whatever. And just me walking towards the mirror to go to the bathroom with this long black hair, I got completely like freaked out and stuff.
Wow.
And like with The Exorcist, I first saw The Exorcist, I think I was probably 19 years old. But at the time, like, me and my friends did Ouija board and like all that.
Oh yeah.
All that stuff. And so I watched that movie and like probably really didn't sleep for like 2 or 3 weeks. And because like, again, every single time I would shut my eyes, I could see that pure evil look. And like to this, and I hate to even talk about this because I'm always afraid it's going to trigger something, but like every once in a while I'll have dreams where one person in the dream, like everybody else thinks is normal. But they look at me and do one of these, and I can see pure evil, like looking back at me, and like they know that I know. Yeah. But nobody else is aware, and so it's purely demonic. Like, it's completely demonic. So The Exorcist triggers some scary stuff in me, and so I can't even. Like, oh my God, I just pictured her face again. Like, I can't even even do it. So every time I'm scrolling like Instagram or whatever, and like I follow a lot of horror people, and like somebody will post her picture and I'm like, like scroll by.
Right.
So stupid. But yeah, and like slasher films again, I'm just like, that could really happen.
Yeah.
I will not go camping because I just
Yeah.
there's killers in the woods. I'm not doing it. And like
Yeah.
houses that are out, as much as I would love to have a house like in the middle of nowhere, all I can
Right.
picture is some fucking psycho showing up at, you know what I mean? Like, and
Right.
you're out in the middle of nowhere and you have
Right.
nobody to help. So
You're like, oh, this
I
was a great
can't.
idea. Seemed like a
Yeah.
great idea until the psycho showed up.
Yeah, like I feel
Yeah.
like if I had a house out in the middle of nowhere, I would have to like fortify it with like razor
Yeah.
wire and like big ass mean dogs and
Yes. Have be
fire
just be heavily
cannons or
armed.
something.
Yeah.
A moat.
So true.
I
So
just
true.
can't.
Yeah.
So, what
So
else? What else is on your mind? What do you want to talk about?
so originally my idea for this conversation was going to be about asking whether or not goth music was related or got, whatever you want to call it, goth, dark arts, death rock. I grew up calling it death rock until about 1993 or so. And but any kind of dark art, does it have anything to do with depression? Is it related to mental health problems? And I found one study that actually came out in May 2020, and it was a study of 940 young adolescents, and it found that there was a correlation between an interest in goth music and more of a tendency toward depression. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it was a causal. In other words, the interest in music doesn't necessarily cause the depression,
Right.
but that the depression was a marker for, or that, I'm sorry, goth music was a depression marker. So it
Okay.
makes it, so in other words, so theoretically what that would mean is if somebody came to their therapist and said, yeah, I really like The Cure, or I really like, I don't know that I'd even call The Cure dark, or goth. I mean, The Cure is The Cure, but
Sure. The
this has
Smiths.
bands such as The Cure and Susie and the Banshees, which I think of as being like, well, yeah, but
Happy.
there's so much, right? There's so much, like Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, springs to mind as being an album with so much range on it, for
Yeah.
The Cure, and
I mean, they have a song called
Disintegration.
Love Cats.
Exactly, right. It's filled with like, well, yeah, like the Head on the Door has some of the most danceable music
Right.
I've ever heard. But but I think of as, I think of, I guess, bands like Joy Division,
Sure.
Lycia being one of
Sure.
them, from that whole dark wave sort of era in the 90s where there were so many great bands.
Yeah.
And I think of all of them, and I think of them as being like, yeah, you can call them goth, but it's just so
Yeah. It's more like
derivative.
dark, I guess.
Yeah, there's definitely like a dark element. I mean, I guess it's really it's a combination of the new romantic influence and kind of a shoegazer quality a little bit,
Yeah.
um but regardless though, uh it's they did find a correlation here. But the thing that I think is really interesting is this study. So there were 940 participants, which is actually a pretty good number. That's a pretty robust number for a study like this. But it was among 10 to 15-year-olds. So like, how many 10-year-old goths do you know? I've known a few over the years, but not very many.
I don't think I've ever known one that I can think of.
They were always like the child of one of my punk friends, who was like,
Sure.
the mom was still wearing a mohawk and the kid was like, yeah, I'm really into Joy Division.
Yeah.
It's like,
I don't know
so
that counts.
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
You're just an extension of your parents. I mean, at 10, I was listening to country music and like
Yeah,
Southern gospel.
yeah,
So, because that's what my
yeah,
parents listened
exactly.
to.
So I don't know, 10 to 15-year-olds just seem so young. Whereas I think of most people that I know who are into anything dark arts, goth, horror, any of that, they're into it around 17, 18, 19. It develops starting around
Sure.
16.
Yeah, sure. I
Or
mean,
into their 50s like me.
right. Well, don't you think though that if you're sort of like whoever, whatever your personality is, that's the type of stuff you're drawn to. So if you're
Yeah.
sort of like a light, bubbly person, you're going to probably listen to lighter pop music. If you're
Yeah.
sort of a melancholy type person, you're probably going to be drawn to things that are a little more melancholy. Like I don't, but to me, it that doesn't like heighten my sadness. If anything, it's like a weird comfort. So
Yeah.
I don't, and I definitely I definitely don't think depressing music causes depression for sure. But I
Yeah.
just think if you already are sort of that type of a person, you would naturally gravitate towards sort of more somber, whether it's classical music or like songs, uh, old country songs about your
Yeah.
dog running away and your wife leaving
Yeah.
you. I mean,
Yeah.
there's always been darker music in every genre. There's dark rap music, there's dark country music, there's
Right.
there's sad pop songs. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I think, the way that I would put it as a psychologist, or specifically as if I were writing a scholarly paper about this, would be that they're both markers for something else. Both depression
Sure.
and interest in this kind of music is a marker for like a more contemplative nature.
Sure.
That you're more likely, well, specifically it's not so much that you're more likely to experience depression if you're more contemplative, but you're more likely to report it. You're more likely to acknowledge it.
Yeah, I think that's huge. I think a lot of people who maybe listen to sort of darker music probably are a lot more introspective and maybe a lot more in touch with their actual feelings. I think a lot of people deny anything that makes them uncomfortable. So they're not going to sit around thinking about the state of the world and why it makes them sad. They're just going to like drink some beer and throw on some Skinner or something and like
Yeah,
party as their way
right.
of dealing with it, as opposed to like people like us who might go, I'm going to sit in the dark and I'm going to listen to Disintegration
Yeah,
and think about how sad I am.
right, right.
But yeah, I feel like there's the type of people that are super in touch with their feelings, and there's the type of people that prefer not to be, and neither one of them is necessarily right or wrong, But
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. I just think of that first song. I think it's called "Plain Song" on Disintegration, and it's such a mournful song. It's like just so over the top, being
I love it.
this like song of like line in it. It's cold. It's cold if you're dead. I'm so cold. It's cold if you're dead. So full of mourning and so like revealing as far as like, yep, that's
Well,
that really hits a certain experience.
isn't the first line I think it's dark and it feels like rain, or something. It's dark and it feels like rain, she said, and it's all
Yeah,
running out like it's the end of the world, she said, and
yeah,
it's so cold. It's like the cold if you were dead.
yes, right,
To
exactly,
me, when you're like 16-year-old me, that's exactly how I felt. Like
exactly,
you're
yeah,
sitting in your house and you're just like, I don't know, nobody likes me, and this and this and this, and Robert gets it, man. He just gets it. And like you
yeah,
sit and you sort of wallow in your misery, but it feels good in a weird,
yes,
demented way,
yeah,
you know?
especially when you have company. That's the thing. You've got the music, you've got company.
Yeah. So and really, like we started this whole conversation with having somebody to relate to.
Yeah,
Sometimes that the only thing you have is music and like or a movie or whatever.
yeah,
And so I think a lot of people probably use music for that,
yeah,
And then again, like when you're in a party and happy mood, like you're at a wedding, you're playing goofy Macarena and
yeah,
whatever stuff gets. I don't know. I haven't been to a wedding in a year, a decade,
yes,
but it's like, ah, I think it just makes sense that if you're, I don't know what I'm talking about, but I don't know. I think that music, just like everything else, is super reflective of where you're at and your mentality. And I mean, I can remember sitting in my room listening to Swans
Yeah,
and just being like, I love this so much.
yeah,
And then my mom going, walking by my room and going, it sounds like a dungeon in there.
right.
So I was
Sounds like,
listening to like filth or something, and I'm just
yeah,
like I'm like wallowing in it, like
right.
this is so brutal and it's so aggressive and it's so heavy. And then my mom's like, sounds like a dungeon in there. And it's just all about your perspective, man. Like, but yet she loves the Carpenters. And to me, that's the most
Right.
depressing,
That is,
scary.
that's for
It's
sure.
so depressing to me. It's like it disturbs me on a weird level. That music, I don't know. We're all different.
Whenever my wife asks me to pick the music, she always says, "Can you pick something to play and not too goth?" She doesn't really have anything against goth music. She loves The Cure,
Yeah.
but it's just she knows that like left to my own devices, I'd be like, doom,
Yeah.
despair, doom. But
It's
uh,
wallowing time.
exactly. And the other day, she was like, not too goth, and I'm like, is Switchblade Symphony too goth? And she was like, I don't know. So I played her Switchblade Symphony. It was a little too goth.
Really?
It
I
was like
always
too
felt like
sexy.
Switchblade Symphony was like Cyndi Lauper. That's what it always reminded. Like it always felt like Cyndi Lauper to me. Like that's like to me
Yeah.
their music was always super happy and like
Well,
bouncing around
it's
at the club.
like, to me, it's like super fetishy. Like it's super like,
I could see that.
we're spooky witches. Woo, we're gonna freak you out.
Yeah, see, and to me that always felt like like goth Cyndi Lauper-ish. Like, and
Yeah,
I'm not being negative because I had like what 2 or 3 of their records. I don't know, but
yeah,
I just it always that to me is like the
yeah,
fun party version of goth,
yes,
whereas
yeah,
like Swans is like
right.
heavy. We're gonna feel
Yeah,
some
no,
shit right now.
Swans is so dark that like you just literally feel like I feel like it's opening a like portal to another world that scares me.
Yeah,
Swans is really dark. Yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
It just I guess I've always just been more drawn to like and I don't know why that is, but I'm super drawn to stuff that like it sort of becomes this whole atmosphere and you just kind of sit in the middle of it and like sink into it,
Yeah,
um but there's room for everything because I also like stupid stuff. So I mean, not
yeah,
to say stuff is stupid, but there's a time and a place. Sometimes I want to listen to the Humpty Dance.
yeah.
Sometimes, sometimes I want to listen to Blood and Honey by Swan. I mean,
There's
everything
there's
has
like a
its
whole
place.
there's like a whole episode on the hip hop documentary series about the Humpty Dance. They're from
Nice.
and so I'm from Northern California, and so it's like it's really funny because that was I had forgotten how huge that was, how big
Yeah.
that era was in hip hop. Yeah,
It's so funny because like when I was in high school was when that stuff was like popular. Like
yeah,
that stuff and like Belle Biv DeVoe and like
yeah,
that kind of stuff. And I hated it at the time because
right,
as a teenager you really have to identify as something.
yeah,
So I'm like, no, I'm a Cure, like I'm into the Cure and I'm like dark and
hmm,
spooky and like punk and like all this stuff, and like this stuff is just childish and stupid and like
yeah,
their lyrics mean nothing and it's just
yeah,
throwaway garbage. And now as an adult, all it does is bring me back good memories. I'm like,
yeah,
throw on some Poison by Belle Biv DeVoe,
yeah.
something by Cinderella, and it just makes me feel happy because it reminds me of being like like a kid,
Yeah,
you know.
I'm the same way about like I worked in fast food restaurants in when I was in high school, and so like I heard "We Don't Need Another Hero" by Tina Turner so many times I just wanted to strangle somebody. And then
Yeah.
like now I hear it and I'm like, oh, that's a great song.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Right.
And there's
Right.
got to be 100 other songs from that era, like all sorts of Hall and Oates, even Duran Duran, who I hated at the time. But
Yes.
but boy, they now I listen.
Foreigner.
It's just
Oh my God. Foreigner and like
yeah, Foreigner.
I hated Def Leppard too. Like I absolutely hated Def Leppard, but now I'm like, if I'm in the car and Def Leppard comes on, I'm like, this is like mint, and I turn. I'm always
Yeah,
like, it's like happy music to me. It just makes me feel
yeah.
so happy.
It's yeah, it's weird how that happens because it just I don't know. I don't have the baggage that I did back then.
Exactly.
I don't really
And like
care.
I
So,
and yeah, I feel like when you're young too, it's like, no, you got to be cool. You can't like anything that's not like we're underground. We only like cool stuff. And now
yeah,
it's like, dude, don't take shit so seriously. Like
right.
you can listen to the most underground, deepest, darkest, whatever, obscure thing, and you can also listen to the Humpty Dance. Like it's
Yeah,
okay.
totally.
You're allowed to do both. You can enjoy them both equally on different levels. It's okay. you
Yeah,
know
right.
it's just like with television or movies. There's some days you want to watch something super serious and really like you get a lot of it, get a lot emotionally out of it, and it's beautifully shot and all this stuff. And then there's days that you want to watch Real Housewives of
Yeah,
wherever. It's like I feel like some people take their lives so seriously that they don't allow themselves to just have those like goofy things.
yeah,
Like it's pure escapism on a stupid different level than escapism on on pure artistic level. So
yeah,
I think that it's probably keeps your sanity to
yeah,
do both,
yeah, definitely.
because you
Yeah,
also don't like there's those other people that also refuse to go deep either. Like I know some people who they everything is super surface level, and anytime you try to have like a deep conversation with them, they don't want any part of it. They
yeah,
tune out. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to talk about anything that makes them uncomfortable. They do the same thing with the music that they listen to. It's all top 40. The TV shows they watch, there's nothing uncomfortable about any of it. And that's fine. You do, live your life how you want to live your life. I just can never imagine reaching that level of denial, I guess.
yeah, yeah,
Because, you know, life is dark. There's a lot of horrible things that happen to you personally, to your friends, to your family, in the world around you. And to just like walk through life pretending like none of that stuff exists to me is, I would rather feel it than not. I feel like they have to feel it. They just refuse to
yeah. They don't want to
acknowledge it
talk
or
about it.
something.
They don't want to talk about it. Maybe it makes it too real.
Yeah, I think that's super unhealthy. I think that I would, like I have a tendency, I'm super chill for the most part, but if something happens, I'll get really pissed off and angry, vent about it, and then it's gone. I'm gone. I'm done. I'm over it. I'm on to the next thing. And I don't know that that's necessarily healthy either, but at least it's not knotted up in my
Yeah,
stomach and like keep swallowing it down and pretend it doesn't exist and, whatever. I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah.
I don't think you can fix anything, and I'm sure you would agree with this. You
Yes.
can't you can't fix anything if you don't acknowledge that it exists.
Yeah, you gotta be aware of it, and you gotta if you the more times you talk through something, the more you're likely to see new. You're likely to see the new perspective. You can
Yeah.
go over something 100 times in your head, and then if you put it to words, that's why writing is so valuable. I think is that you can write something out, and it really makes a different kind of sense.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Or even just again having that one person to sort of
Yeah,
and
bounce it off of.
you feel safe that you can tell them like what you're thinking, even some of the really dark stuff sometimes, you know, and it's not always the person that it should be. Like
Yeah,
sometimes different people serve different purposes. in
Yeah.
your life, I think that some people can't handle probably certain aspects of our personalities that other people can.
Yeah. Right.
But I think, I don't know, because they're like sometimes like I get really dark about stuff. And I'm like, if I don't have somebody put me in check, it just gets dark, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, no, you're not dying of a brain tumor, Tara. Please stop.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, it
Yeah.
happens.
I
Or,
have those moments too.
yeah, it gets very like, with the whole being artistic and stuff too, but, having to sort of fit into the mainstream world also because I have to work for a living. And I spend way more time doing that about stuff I don't care about than stuff I'm actually passionate about. Like it gets very dark sometimes. Like, why am I even on this planet? Like what is the point of all this? I'm doing all this
Right.
stuff that nobody cares about and blah 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 blah. And
Yeah.
yeah. So there's a couple people in my life that'll go, shut up.
Yeah.
People care about it, take it down a notch, and then, then I'm like, whatever, and then move on with my life for a few days until it comes back up again. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Anyway.
I'm unloading all my stuff on you.
That's good.
Don't let me get started on body dysmorphia.
Oh man, that's a whole field. Yeah, that's not my field, but it sure is interesting. Boy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting and tragic. Well, I need to take a break. If
Okay.
are we wrapping up, or do you want to
It's
go
up to
for it?
you. If you want to keep going, we can keep going. If not, we can say goodbye here. How long have we been talking? Let's
An
see.
hour and
About an hour and
37.
a half.
Yeah.
Something like
No,
that.
let's call it a night.
All right. Well, this
Great.
has been super interesting. I hope that you had fun.
Yeah, it was a blast. Thank
I
you.
really enjoyed this. I think this was you just have, you're a wealth of knowledge. So
Oh, thank you so much.
that was
All right.
fascinating.
Well, this was really fun. I'm glad to finally connect with you after years of following your Facebook and your work. So good to
Yeah.
meet you.
Good to meet you too. And sincerely thank you for what you do because I feel like
Oh,
you're
thank
saving
you.
lives and you're going to save even more. So thank you for that. And after we're done, send me any links that you want me to put in the YouTube
Oh, excellent.
and I'll get this uploaded and I'll tag you and we'll be good to go. So
Excellent. All right.
thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great night. Have a great
You
weekend.
too. See
Bye-bye.
ya. Bye.